Why Americans sit in a parked car for an hour instead of going inside. A man pulls into a driveway. His coworker gets out of the car. And instead of walking inside, they just sit there, talking, for an hour. Never come in the house, not once. A woman watching this happen from her kitchen window started to wonder if her husband was in some kind of secret double life. Today, we're solving one of the weirder, funnier little American habits. And honestly, the theories people came up with are half the fun. The scenario is simple. Someone notices a family member or friend regularly getting picked up or visited by someone who never actually comes inside. Instead, both people just sit in the parked car, sometimes for 30 minutes, sometimes over an hour, having what looks like a completely normal conversation, just in a vehicle, going nowhere. And to someone from a culture where visitors are automatically invited inside, offered a drink, made to feel welcome, this looks bizarre, almost rude. So naturally, the first instinct is to assume something's being hidden. And the reactions to this question genuinely split into two very different camps. One wholesome, one extremely suspicious. The wholesome camp says, privacy, plain and simple. A car is one of the only truly private spaces available when you live with other people. Roommates, kids, parents, whoever. If you want to talk about something sensitive without little ears listening in, or without a nosy roommate walking past, the car becomes an accidental soundproof booth that happens to be parked right outside. There's a genuinely sweet version of this too. Parents who go shopping that mysteriously never results in any shopping bags. Or couples who go for a drive specifically to talk about things the kids don't need to overhear. Sometimes literally just to vent about the kids themselves. One person described paying for an actual babysitter purely so they and their spouse could sit in a parked car and talk in peace, which is either the most relatable or the funniest use of childcare money in this entire video. Then there's the other camp, and this is where it gets genuinely entertaining, because people did not hold back with the theories. The suggestions ranged from completely innocent to fully convinced this is a crime scene. Buying drugs, smoking something the spouse doesn't approve of, having an affair, being an actual spy. Someone specifically brought up decades of Cold War thriller movies as their entire evidence base. One comment simply asked, in genuine confusion, "What are you, mobsters?" And to be fair, some of that suspicion isn't completely baseless. Several people admitted fairly openly that they've absolutely used exactly this setup to smoke in peace or to have a conversation they genuinely didn't want overheard by someone inside, which, depending on your perspective, either confirms the suspicion or just reinforces the privacy explanation from a slightly less wholesome angle. But there's a really specific generational detail buried in this whole conversation that explains a lot. Multiple people brought up that this used to be a lot more common before smartphones existed. Car phones, back when they existed at all, were massive, expensive, and rare. Home landlines meant every single phone call happened somewhere the entire household could potentially overhear. If you wanted an actual private conversation as a teenager or young adult, sitting in a car, sometimes not even going anywhere, just parked in the driveway, was genuinely one of your only real options. It's basically the same instinct behind teenagers making out in a parked car, or blasting music with the windows up, specifically so parents inside the house can't hear the conversation. Once you're an independent adult with your own space, most people naturally grow out of needing to do that. But for some people, the habit, or at least the appeal of it, never fully goes away. Now here's the detail that flips this from weird habit into something a little more touching, depending on the situation. Several people pointed out a version of this that's less about secrecy and more about not wanting to be a burden. If a friend's dropping you off and the conversation's still going, sometimes it genuinely feels easier to just keep talking in the car for another 10 or 15 minutes rather than inviting them inside, which might socially obligate them to stay even longer than either of you actually planned. There's even a name for the extended version of this among some Midwesterners, the long goodbye, where a visit that should have ended 20 minutes ago somehow keeps extending, one more topic at a time, standing right next to the car with the keys already in hand. And there's a version specifically tied to someone going through something difficult, a divorce, a health scare, a personal crisis, who genuinely doesn't feel comfortable discussing it inside a house with someone else's spouse and kids potentially walking through the room. The car, in that context, isn't suspicious at all. It's actually a small act of consideration, both for the person's privacy and for not putting the household in an awkward position. So what's the actual verdict here? Innocent? Or should the wife in the original story genuinely be worried? The honest answer that most people landed on, it depends entirely on context, and that's genuinely unsatisfying, but true. A quick 5 or 10 minutes finishing up a conversation before someone heads inside? Completely normal. Happens constantly. Nobody thinks twice. A recurring scheduled visit where someone shows up specifically to sit in a car for a full hour and never once sets foot in the house? That's genuinely a little unusual, and the most common, non-dramatic explanation is some version of, this person needs privacy for something they're not ready to talk about in front of your whole household, which could be anything from a stressful divorce to, yes, occasionally, something the person genuinely doesn't want you to know about. What almost nobody suggested, interestingly, was to simply ask, which might be the most American irony buried in this entire conversation. A culture famous for being blunt and direct somehow produces an entire thread of people speculating about spies and secret affairs, when the actual fastest solution was just asking your own husband a direct question over dinner. And that's honestly what makes this particular habit so entertaining to break down. It's not really about cars at all. It's about how a completely mundane, harmless behavior, needing 5 minutes of privacy that a shared household doesn't provide, can look, from the outside, exactly like the opening scene of a crime documentary. The car isn't hiding anything sinister most of the time. It's just the last remaining private room in a house that technically has plenty of rooms, none of which offer the one thing a parked car does for free. Nobody else can walk in. So next time you see two people sitting in a parked car outside a house, doing absolutely nothing but talking, resist the urge to write the crime novel in your head. Odds are overwhelmingly good it's just two people who ran out of places in the house where nobody would interrupt them. If a parked car in a driveway can turn into a full amateur investigation, wait until you see the surprisingly specific etiquette Americans have about garbage at the movie theater. It's a completely different flavor of, wait, that's a real rule? And it's coming up next. Be honest in the comments. Have you ever done the car talk thing? And what was it actually about?